Hello, Stacey.
Hi, Zach.
How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Better than I was last week. Thank you again for being willing to chat with me about things beyond the EA.
Of course.
I've come to you today with some very pointed questions about specific things on the test, but first I thought it would be good to just sort of like check in on what we talked about last week, which was mostly just like to continue working through foundations of math. And I think I'm more or less on track to finish the book by Sunday. Um,
Which was the
maybe,
plan. So good for you.
yes, it is the plan because then the next weekend I'm taking the practice exam again. I'm not sure I'll hit that Sunday deadline, to be perfectly frank with you. To be I'm not sure I'm going to hit that deadline, to be perfectly honest with you. Work is very busy right now. Not for any specific reason other than I'm going out of town in a couple weeks. So I'm trying to front load as much work as possible so I don't leave any of my teammates in the lurch while I'm gone. Um, I'm not just a superb podcast host. I'm also the consummate teammate.
Of
So
course. Of course.
so
Doesn't
that's
surprise me at all.
um, so that's why I think I'm falling a little bit behind. Just of course prioritizing the things that are
Also,
more important right now.
yeah, of course. And when you're setting up a study plan, it's like you're the weather forecaster. You're not going to get it exactly right. You make the best guesses that you can for your time frame and what am I going to do today and this week and next week. But you have to adjust a little bit as you go. That's fine.
Yeah. But but I do feel like I am back on track more or less. So last week, for listeners who maybe missed the episode, you gave me a lot of mindfulness tips and some tips on like how to stay focused and ways to sort of what I called like schedule my distractions. And I found that all to be very helpful. And actually reminded me a lot of some of the breathing exercises that I learned when I was in my undergrad studying acting. So it was like a nice sort of full circle moment.
That's really interesting. And did you end up trying any new techniques or like going and looking at the UCLA website, or did you use some of the stuff that you had learned in undergrad or
Yeah, I poked around the website, and the thing that I felt like I could do easiest was just to keep my electronics in another room, which I kind of laughed at because like that's how you would take the test in a test center or even
True.
online. Like your electronics would not be in the room. So I laughed because it was just like sort of like another version of prep for the test.
I feel like a lot of life is prep for a test like the
Sure.
GMAT because it's ultimately testing you. Like, yes, the math and other things on it that are facts and things that we learned in school, but the test is really testing you on decision making, which includes logical decision making, but also like time management and what am I going to do and am I going to do this or not do it kinds of things. And all of that is a metaphor, not just for business school itself, but for life. So yeah.
Actually, a good segue to the first thing I wanted to bring up, which is sometimes I'll answer questions, and I took your advice of trying some simple data sufficiency questions to get familiar with the question format. And I wanted to ask, what advice do you have for when I'm questioning my confidence? And what I mean by that is like sometimes I'll feel really confident that I have the right answer and I'll select it and it's wrong. And then on the next question, I'll start to doubt the confidence that I had on the previous question. And like, do you know what I mean? Like the
Yes.
second guessing and then third guessing.
100%. This is
Okay.
being human. This is totally understand what you mean. So a couple of things. You talked about selecting an answer and then you're immediately finding out that it's right or wrong, and then you're immediately going to the next question before you review the question that you just did. Is that
No,
how?
I am reviewing it.
Okay, so you're reviewing before you go to the next one. Okay. So, and I asked you that because, dear listeners, if you are doing something like this, I do recommend doing one of two things when you're doing some kind of a problem set, not just a single problem, which is either you're going to do it in what I call exam mode or study mode. Exam mode means that you're mimicking the test conditions, which means you're not knowing whether you got it right or wrong in between. So you're doing a set of 4 questions in a row, bing, 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 without knowing how it's going until you're done with the set. And so in that case, you don't have the issue of doubting yourself in the next one, besides normal anxiety that we all feel every time we answer a question, because you literally don't know whether you got it right or wrong. So you do all of your review afterwards. If you're going to do the study mode, which is the other mode, it's yes, I'm doing a question, then I'm looking at the answer, but I'm also immediately reviewing. So what you don't want to do is, and you didn't do this, Zach, but just cautioning other people. What you don't want to do is like do a problem, look at the answer, be like, oh, I got that wrong, and then immediately go do another problem because yes,
Well, I've done that too.
of course, that's going to kill your confidence, right? Because you don't know what happened on that problem that you were confident about. So study mode is, okay, I'm going to do this problem, but then I'm going to do a thorough review of it before I go and do the next problem. And the goal of the review, it's really important to remind yourself that when you're doing a problem, you're not actually learning how to get better at that problem. You're simply doing the problem with everything that you already knew before you started that problem. When you learn to get better is after you've selected your answer, and then you go back to review the problem. And, match this with any kind of sports analogy. Pick your favorite sport. Mine is tennis. When you're watching professional tennis players play a match, which is mostly how we see them actually playing, right? They're not learning how to get better while they're playing that match. They're bringing everything that they already have to that match. It's all the preparation that goes on behind the scenes that we're not seeing that gets them to be the great players that they are. And so really think of it that way, as when I'm doing the problem, I'm just doing it. I'm not learning. I'm not getting better. The opportunity comes after I've selected my answer, and now I'm going and looking at that problem. And this is now, okay, well, I was confident. I did get it wrong. Yes, the first part of your brain is going to be like, I got it wrong. Why did I get this wrong? And you'll be a little disappointed. But what I want you to start to turn that into is, I'm about to get better. If you only did problems that you got right, you wouldn't be getting better. So in that case, if your score is what you want it to be, then great, you're done, take the test. But if it's not yet what you want to be, then you have to do things that you are going to get wrong in order to have an opportunity to actually lift your score and get better. So I want you to start to train yourself. It's almost like this mindfulness training too, of when you have that moment of like, I got that wrong, literally say to yourself out loud, if necessary, until it becomes a habit, this is an opportunity. I'm about to get better. I'm about to learn something. And get a little excited about that. You're looking for those opportunities because you're looking for, okay, what am I going to do next time? And that alone, first of all, that's just going to help you prepare for the test better. And that's also going to carry over as you do subsequent problems into your confidence level, because you know that you've done something to remedy whatever it was that led you to make the mistake that you made on that prior problem.
How do I know if I'm getting tricked by the exam or if I'm tricking myself?
So in the moment, you don't. Again, this is while you're doing versus reviewing. While you're doing, you don't know. So that's what it is. But when you're reviewing, that's what you're trying to figure out. One of the things that you're doing when you're reviewing is, and actually this would be true regardless of whether you get it right or wrong, you're trying to understand what traps are they setting? Because the test writers are sometimes actually actively setting traps. You can see it in some of the, not on data sufficiency exactly, but like on problem solving, you'll see an answer choice that's clearly, you make this math mistake, you're going to get this answer.
Mm-hmm.
So they are setting traps for you. But the questions are also fair. Like, I don't want to make it sound like they're, evil test makers. Like, it's fair. You can get there. But yes, they're going to set traps if you're not paying enough attention, or if you're getting distracted, or if you're, misreading something or whatever. And that's part of your review, is to literally say, either how did they get me if I fell for a trap, or did I make a careless mistake? Was it something on my end where I need to build my process better? I need to be more careful to write things out more thoroughly on my scratch paper. I need to take a deep breath and slow down a little bit to make sure that I'm actually reading every word so that I don't miss that keyword that changed everything in the problem. Those kinds of things. So that review you're doing, I'm going to go back to the word I used last time of diagnose. You're diagnosing, where did the disconnect come from? And what do I need to change? What new habit do I need to build that's going to minimize the chances that that same disconnect or same type of disconnect happens again? I'll also point out that what we're talking about, you do this every day at work. You hit problems at work, and then you figure out solutions to them. And then you file that away in your brain, because the next time a similar problem comes up, you're asking yourself, oh, can I solve this the same way? Or can I take parts of these 3 different solutions to these 3 different problems and combine them to get to this better solution for this new situation that's facing me at work today? So a lot of studying for the EA is the same thing.
It's just, I moved on from the quant stuff because I was getting frustrated, and also taking your advice, was like, I'm just going to focus on something that can give me like the confidence boost. But I was getting frustrated at the silly mistakes because they, I felt embarrassed, honestly, by getting some of them wrong. And I'm sure I'm not alone. It's just the diagnosing is a little painful.
It is. This is also why, yes, I'm glad that you took the advice that we talked about last time to just be like, okay, forget it. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go do something that I know I'm better at and feel better about. Most of the time, you're going to make more careless mistakes with the area that's weaker. Although I will say there's a danger when it's your stronger area of like your brain kind of goes on autopilot because it's your stronger area. And then you start to make careless mistakes there too. So, do watch out for that. For careless mistakes in particular, I'll say these are the easiest things to fix. These are the easiest things to learn from. And yes, it's super frustrating because you're like, I knew that. Why did I do that?
I know.
Um, that typically comes down to process. It's not that you didn't know it, you knew it. It's that there's something about your process that's too loose that's allowing those careless mistakes to creep in. And so from there, you go figure out, okay, I need to, add a step or a half a step to my process. I need to organize this better on my scratch paper, whatever that might be, but build some new habit that's going to put a catch in for you. You don't need to do this for every single thing that you could ever possibly make a careless mistake on. You do this when you make a careless mistake because the super annoying and sad thing is that we all tend to make the same kinds of careless mistakes over and over again. Like we all have our patterns. And that's
Yes, we do.
so frustrating. But identify yours and then set up checks for those. And again, I'll say you do this at work all the time too, right? Because you know that there are certain things that you either like to do less or that just for whatever reason at work. And so you set up, okay, but I still have to get to a good level of quality because I want to do well in my job and make things easier for my colleagues and that sort of thing. And so you figure out how to set up little processes or checks or whatever for yourself so that you can still get through those things.
So like I said, I moved to another section, verbal, and I was flying high. But I did have some questions and I wrote them down. I'm old fashioned sometimes. For the reading comprehension, I was getting most questions correct, but I was getting so bored. Like some of
Welcome
the
to
stuff
reading comprehension.
I know. So like how do you this is where I feel like I could lose stamina really fast. Um,
And just you're gonna just be like, I don't care. I don't care about
I
this
don't
topic.
care.
Yeah, so here's what I do. And here's what I recommend my students do. There are certain types of topics that I know I like. I was a biology major. If it's like a biology-based passage, I'm going to like it. If it's one of the ones that's, I don't know, astronomy or physics, my brain's going to start to tune out. The social science ones, I'm usually okay with. The business ones, actually, I also kind of get bored and all the terminology makes my eyes glaze over. So I have my go-to people who I know in real life who like these different topics. I have a colleague who was a physics major and who loves all of that stuff. And so when I get a passage that's that area, what I think is, oh, okay, I know my colleague likes this topic. I pretend I'm just like reading an article in the paper. And for some reason, I don't know, I can't just send them the link. Let's just go with it. So I can't just send them the link to the article. So I want to learn enough about this and remember enough about it that I can tell them, the executive summary later on of like, oh, I read this article that I thought you'd find really interesting. And here were the main points of it. And like, I just do that. I only need to be interested in this for the next like 6 to 8 minutes until I'm done with the question. So I do that to sort of fool my brain into just learn enough that you can go tell this person about it later and have that actual person in your life, in your mind, so that it's more real in that way. And I have different people for the different types of things.
This is the best advice you've ever given because essentially what you're saying is, Zach, do some acting.
I love it. I love it.
Pretend you have smart friends. um, that's I really like that. I really value my relationships and sharing news articles. So
Yeah, you just have
I'm
to
gonna
suspend the disbelief for a second that for some reason you can't just send them the article.
yeah,
The internet went down right after you read the article.
they don't have a subscription. I love that. I really like that. Now I just want to go do some of those problems.
By the way, you can use me for the science for the biology based ones if you.
Perfect. Yeah, all of my friends are knuckleheads. So I was getting those right. And then the sentence correction, I have a lot of questions about that. Even though I was getting them mostly right, I was really confused how to study for that.
Sentence correction is a challenge. It's a challenge because there are a lot of rules, first of all. And as anyone who's ever studied English grammar knows, some rules are hard and fast, but many rules can be broken in some way or another. There's not like 100% universal application of it. And then there are some rules that really are like, do you have to have a comma here or not? And it's up to you. The Oxford comma, there's huge debates going on about this online. So what do you do about that? For things like that, they're not tested, but there are things that can be this way or that way. And the world has decided there's two ways to do this. They won't be tested on the test, but you can use them to help you as clues for parsing something to help you get to the things that are in fact tested on the test. For something like this, it's typically not good enough to just study grammar generally because there are specific things that the EA has chosen to test and specifically things that they've chosen not to test. And so you really want something that is showing you how grammar is tested specifically on the EA. And I'll say this just because we do have it, but other companies do this too. So I'm not trying to do a plug, but we have it's marketed as a GMAT book, but we have a book that talks about sentence correction where we have literally gone and analyzed, and we actually did this for both the GMAT and the EA, which are coming from the same question writers in the first place, but that analyzed over a period of years the questions that were published in the official guide, questions that were given in the practice exams to come up with a compendium of what's tested and how is it tested. I have literally a, I don't know, 200 to 300 page Word document that I bet the people who write your questions would be super interested to see of how we deconstructed all of this stuff and how we came up with, okay, this is how specifically the GMAC tests this on their exam. But you want something like that where it's teaching you what this test tests, but it's also not teaching you a bunch of other stuff that the test doesn't test because you could spend a year studying grammar alone and nobody wants to do that.
As I was doing these questions, my GMAC employee brain kicked on, and I know that so many people consider the verbal reasoning section of GMAC exams to be easier than the verbal reasoning section of the GRE. As somebody who teaches all of these exams, I was really curious to just like for a second ask you why that is and what makes the GRE verbal possibly harder.
So I'll say that overall, this really depends on your own strengths and weaknesses, obviously. On the GRE, so both exams, all three exams, GRE, GMAT, and EA, test like reading comprehension and logical reasoning and all of that, analytical reasoning. In terms of the fact and rule-based questions, the GRE is more focused on vocabulary and meaning. The EA is focused more on grammar and meaning. And then the GMAT actually dropped grammar, so it doesn't test either vocab or grammar or meaning in these contexts any longer. So first of all, just are you better at vocabulary or grammar is going to determine whether one of the two tests, the GRE or the EA, feels better for you. I will also say that in terms of studying, if you do need to study one of those two, more people in my experience have felt more comfortable with learning grammar than with memorizing vocabulary. Vocabulary, it's memorization. It just is more of a slog. It's more boring.
Trust me, I know about
It's not like
memorizing
rules
words.
that make sense, right? It's just memorize a bunch of words. And then the other thing is, it's fairly well established, the pool of grammar rules that the EA tests. And so it's not a small pool. There's a decent number of things to learn, but like we can say like, here are the things and, here are the things that you need to know. Vocabulary is like the dictionary. They could choose any word they want to, technically.
Mm-hmm.
And while again, there we've also analyzed and we have, lists of these things, words that are most likely to show up, have most commonly appeared in the past X years on the GRE. Yes, it's still vocabulary, so it still could be that they can choose anything they want, which feels a bit more daunting.
What's interesting, though, is that on some reading comprehension questions on the EA or the GMAT, they do ask sometimes like what a word means in context, which isn't necessarily vocabulary, but there is an element of being aware of
There is. And I'll say
definition.
on those ones, so those are like, it's vocab and meaning. That's why for both of those, I was like, vocab and meaning or grammar and
Meaning.
meaning. All of this is in service of like, what does this mean? And is it being communicated clearly? Because that's what really matters. When it's in the context of reading comprehension, if you'd never seen that word before, the clues are still there to figure it out because it's in the context of this whole paragraph and passage. You will have an advantage if you're already familiar with the word and you know, usually will be more than one meaning for a word that they select for that kind of thing. So if you know multiple meanings for the word, yes, you're going to have an advantage. But you have the context of the story around it to help
Yeah,
you puzzle out that meaning if
true.
you don't know the word.
That was a bit of a deviation, but I figured since I was kind of breezing through this section, I would ask a question that maybe other people who've kind of dipped their toes in all these exams maybe have a question about. And then lastly, working on the critical reasoning questions, probably the hardest for me of the three. Just generally, do you have like a favorite tip as I continue making my way through the sample questions?
So for critical reasoning in general, it's one question type, but there are different sub question types, I'm going to call them, which is essentially what are they asking you to analyze for this particular argument? They might ask you to strengthen it. They might ask you to weaken it. They might ask you to find an assumption being made by the author of the argument. They might ask you to find the conclusion, right? So there's different types of analyses, basically. And actually, the first thing that you want to do when a critical reasoning pops up on the screen is not start reading the argument. It's go look at the question stem and identify what kind of question they're asking you, what kind of analysis they're asking you to do.
So it's
And
not
then
look
you
at the answers, it's try to
yeah,
identify the type of question.
type of question. So you have like the paragraph and then the question stem and then the answers below. You're going for that like that offset question that's in its own little paragraph, right? And this requires you, of course, to have done some study ahead of time. So first of all, that you know what all these different subtypes are. And second of all, so that you've studied how to recognize what they are from the, sentence that they give you as they're asking the question. Once you know, oh, they want me to strengthen it versus, oh, they want me to find the conclusion or find a flaw or whatever, that's giving you an angle to how you want to read it and how you want to analyze it as you're reading it. So you're not just kind of reading it blind and then going, okay, now what are you asking me to do with this? So that will help you to focus your reading and focus your analysis as you're reading a little bit more. I will say, given how you're talking about verbal so far, your goal there should be a perfect score in that section. So you want to be doing enough study to make that happen, but it's still going to be less time than you're going to be spending on the other sections. And I would also do exactly what you did this week, which is you don't schedule those ones exactly. You just, when you get annoyed by the other sections, then you go do some verbal.
Okay. I might run out of questions. Wait, I shouldn't say that.